Some of the strangest machines ever built were real military vehicles. Some worked, some failed, and some shouldn't even exist. Let's explore them era by era.
To kick things off, here is pre-World War I.
Leonardo da Vinci's fighting vehicle. 500 years before the tank existed, Leonardo da Vinci sketched one. A giant wooden shell ringed with cannons, powered by men turning cranks inside. Nobody had the muscle to actually move it. Next, pedrail machine, a mechanical centipede designed to step over rough ground using feet instead of wheels. It worked in theory, but weighed so much it could barely move. Engineers called it promising. Everyone else called it absurd. Sim's Motor Scout, a motorized tricycle with a machine gun and a tiny iron shield, driven by a man sitting completely exposed in the open. Brave enough to patent, insane enough to actually demonstrate to the military. Then, Fowler Armored Traction Engine, a massive steam tractor wrapped in iron plating, designed to haul supplies during the Boer War, while presenting the largest, slowest target imaginable to anyone with a rifle and basic patience.
Continuing with World War I.
Tsar Tank. Russia built a war machine with front wheels 9 meters tall, making it look like a giant tricycle from a nightmare. The tiny rear wheel sank into every patch of soft ground and refused to come out. Now this is the Boireau machine, a giant metal cage designed to flatten barbed wire by continuously rolling its own frame over itself like a mechanical caterpillar. It worked at roughly the speed of a bored tortoise, which made it useless.
Frot-Lafley Landship.
A metal shed built on a wheeled truck chassis, tall enough to be spotted from considerable distance, and top-heavy enough to tip on anything steeper than a slight incline. The mud finished it off. Up next, Trefferswagen. Germany built this enormous wheeled crusher to simply roll over everything in its path. One was made, it barely moved under its own weight, and the project quietly disappeared. Possibly the least useful tank ever conceived. Skeleton Tank, an American prototype built from iron pipes instead of solid armor, designed to be light enough to cross trenches without sinking. The crew sat exposed in a tiny box and could see everything, including incoming fire. Killen Straight Armored Tractor. A farm tractor fitted with armor plating, 2 rear track systems, and a front steering wheel, which sounded clever until anyone tried driving it through mud. It failed militarily, but accidentally taught engineers what tank tracks actually needed to do. Then, Orionwagen, a German machine that combined wheels and treads in a system so mechanically complicated that it broke down before proving whether the concept worked at all. Complexity without reliability is just expensive failure. Next up, interwar period. Carden Lloyd one-man tankette. A metal box barely large enough to contain a crouching adult, with a machine gun positioned so awkwardly that firing it accurately required a level of discomfort that bordered on self-punishment. Technically a tank, barely. Next, Pavlov's armored motorcycle. A small, integrated armored vehicle supported by a single front wheel and rear tracks that made steering on anything except perfectly flat pavement essentially impossible. The concept was a terrible idea. Now this is the tracked motorcycle Lehetra, a motorcycle with the rear wheel replaced by a tractor belt and a treaded front tire. It could theoretically climb anything, but steering it required strength, patience, and apparently a complete indifference to personal safety or dignity. Next, Armstead Snow Motor. Instead of wheels, this vehicle moved on 2 large, rotating cylinders shaped like giant corkscrews that pulled it through snow and mud. Genuinely effective in the right conditions, completely useless the instant it hit pavement. Kalinin K-7. A Soviet aircraft so enormous that its landing gear pods were large enough to fit gun turrets inside them. With 12 engines and a wingspan matching some warships, it was less an airplane than a flying opinion. Let's move on to World War II. Bob Semple Tank. New Zealand built a tank using a farm tractor and corrugated roofing iron, and the result looked exactly as improvised as it sounds. Created out of wartime desperation rather than engineering confidence, it showed more courage than capability. Schofield Tank. A tank that could retract its tracks and drive on wheels for road speed, then lower them again for cross-country. An impressive engineering achievement that, unfortunately, produced a vehicle too complicated for the chaos of actual combat. Kugelpanzer. A spherical one-man tank captured by Soviet forces and never explained by anyone who built it. One exists in a museum today, its purpose and origin still genuinely unknown. Perhaps the most mysterious vehicle in military history, Antonov A-40 Krylia tanker. The Soviets attached enormous glider wings to a functioning light tank with the intention of towing it airborne and releasing it to glide into battle. It flew. Landing it without destroying everything was the part nobody solved. Next, Hafner rotor buggy, a military jeep fitted with a rotor blade overhead and a tail fin behind, designed to be towed into the air behind a bomber and dropped into combat zones. It actually flew, which somehow makes it stranger. Praying mantis, a vehicle with a hydraulic extending arm that could lift two soldiers high above cover to fire over walls and hedges, while the armoured hull stayed hidden below. Mechanically ingenious and practically impossible to maintain in the field. Up next, Krupp Reumer S, a mine-clearing machine, built in two halves connected by a central pivot, rolling on four enormous steel wheels. It looked like a mechanical spider and weighed enough to detonate anything unfortunate enough to be beneath it. Alket Minenräumer, a German mine-clearing vehicle that detonated explosives by simply rolling heavy steel wheels over them. Unstable on uneven ground, uncomfortable to operate, and deeply alarming to watch from any angle. An awkward solution to a genuinely terrible problem. Lauster Wargel LW5, a German recovery vehicle on two massive wheels, specifically built to extract heavy tanks from mud so deep nothing else could reach them. It looked like two tractors merged in an industrial accident and somehow worked better for it. Goliath Tracked Mine, a remote-controlled miniature tank loaded with explosives, guided toward its target by an operator holding a very long wire at what everyone hoped was a safe distance. Small, slow, and genuinely terrifying if it reached you. SD Kfz-2 Kettenklad, half motorcycle, half tractor, it used tracked rear propulsion and a motorcycle front wheel to go places neither vehicle could manage alone. Small enough to fit inside cargo aircraft, weird enough that nobody forgot seeing one. Up next, T10 Shop Tractor, a wheeled vehicle with its front wheels replaced by massive steel rollers to detonate mines by driving over them. It looked like a giant industrial tricycle, built by someone who had strong opinions about not using conventional roads. T1E3 Aunt Jemima, a mine-clearing apparatus connected to a tank hull and rolled over minefields to trigger explosions before infantry arrived. It looked absurd, weighed as much as the tank pulling it, and genuinely worked better than most alternatives. Great Panjandrum, two enormous steel wheels connected by a tube of explosives and propelled by rockets, designed to roll up beaches and demolish sea walls. In testing, it veered off course, spun wildly, and nearly killed the observers watching it. Aerosan NKL-26, an armoured sled driven across frozen lakes and snowfields by an aircraft propeller mounted at the rear. Soviet forces used them to move quickly across terrain that would have immobilized anything tracked or wheeled. Now let's look at Cold War. Chrysler TV-8, a proposed nuclear-powered tank whose entire crew, engine and weapons were packed into an enormous turret sitting on a tiny hull, designed to survive atomic blasts. The top-heavy proportions meant surviving the enemy was the easier part. Object 279, a Soviet heavy tank shaped like a flying saucer, sitting on 4 parallel track sets, specifically engineered so that nuclear shockwaves would deflect around its curved hull rather than flip it over. It worked, and somehow looked even stranger for it. ZIL 4904, a large Soviet transport vehicle that moved using 2 rotating screw-shaped cylinders instead of wheels or tracks. It could cross swamps and deep snow that stopped everything else, but became completely immobile the moment it reached pavement. M50 Ontos, a vehicle small enough to hide in the undergrowth, but bristling with 6 recoilless rifles capable of destroying heavy tanks. Marines loved it in Vietnam. Everyone who saw it for the first time took a moment to process what they were looking at. Vespa 150 TAP, a classic French motor scooter with a full-sized anti-tank cannon mounted to the frame, designed for French paratroopers to drop into combat and immediately start destroying armor. It is the most dangerous thing anyone ever rode to work. VZ-8 Airgeep, a flat-bodied flying platform using ducted fans hidden in the hull to hover over obstacles that wheeled vehicles could not cross. It worked well enough in testing, but required piloting skills far beyond the average infantry soldier. VZ-9 Avrocar, a Canadian-built flying saucer designed for the US military that genuinely resembled every UFO illustration from the 1950s. It could hover, but refused to climb more than a meter off the ground, regardless of what anyone tried. Hiller VZ-1 Pawnee, a flying platform where the pilot stood on a disc directly above a spinning fan and steered by shifting their own body weight. It flew, technically. It also required a level of personal bravery that exceeded most military requirements. Loon-class Ekranoplan, a vehicle that was neither aeroplane nor ship, skimming the ocean surface using ground effect lift while carrying 3 anti-ship missiles on its back. At full speed, it looked impossible. At rest, it looked like something from a dream. KM Caspian Sea Monster, so enormous that Western intelligence analysts who spotted it in satellite photographs spent years debating what it actually was. It flew at hundreds of kilometers per hour just above the water surface, which raised more questions than it answered. The next one, TC-497 Overland Train, an American land transport over 500 feet long with 54 individually powered wheels, designed to cross deserts and frozen tundra, carrying cargo that no road could support. It worked. Building roads was simply cheaper. 1K-17 Shati, a Soviet vehicle carrying a bank of 13 laser apertures made from synthetic rubies, designed to blind the optical sensors and targeting systems of enemy tanks and aircraft from kilometers away. It was real, and it looked exactly this strange. Next, Progvev-T, a jet engine mounted on a tank chassis to blast buried landmines out of the ground using pure heat and pressure. The approach required driving toward the explosives first, which was presumably less alarming from inside a tank. Object 775, a Soviet tank so flat the crew were essentially lying down inside it, designed to fire guided missiles instead of conventional shells, and present the smallest possible target to any enemy who found it first. Up next, M113 Aerogavin, a proposal to attach wings and a tail fin to a standard armored personnel carrier, allowing it to fly over defensive obstacles before landing and immediately continuing as a ground vehicle. Most people who heard about it said no. Lark LX, an amphibious vehicle on 4 tires, capable of driving directly from a ship through heavy surf and onto a beach carrying military equipment. It looked exactly as extraordinary as that sounds. UDES XX-20, a Swedish tank built in 2 separate articulated halves that bent in the middle, allowing the hull to flex and climb over terrain that would strand a conventional vehicle. Each half had its own function, and neither half made sense alone. Stridsvagn 103, the only main battle tank ever built without a turret. To aim the gun, the entire vehicle rotates, or the suspension tilts the hull. It sounds impractical, it looks bizarre, and it was genuinely among the most effective tanks of its era. Bartini-Beriev VVA-14, a Soviet aircraft designed to take off from water, transition to ground effect flight just above the surface, and hunt submarines. Its shape resembled a spacecraft more than any recognizable aircraft, which suited a vehicle that defied easy categorization. Object 760, a Soviet amphibious tank that rode on tracks, designed to cross swamps and water obstacles that conventional armor could never safely enter. Next, Sea Shadow, a stealth ship with the angular profile of a fighter aircraft, built to test whether naval vessels could hide from radar the same way stealth planes did. It worked so well, it was kept secret for over a decade. Finishing off with modern era, Zuber-class LCAC, the largest hovercraft ever built, capable of carrying 3 main battle tanks at speed across open water and directly onto a beach. It is louder than most aircraft, faster than most ships, and stranger than almost anything afloat. Boston Dynamics Big Dog, a 4-legged robot that moved with an uncanny animal-like gait while carrying heavy loads for soldiers across terrain that wheeled vehicles could not handle. The military eventually rejected it because it was simply too loud to use anywhere quietly. Flyboard Air, a personal, turbine-powered hoverboard that lifts a single person into the air using 5 jet engines and allows them to fly at speed. It has been seriously tested as a military scouting platform, which is either the future or a spectacular mistake. Now this is the MAZ-7907, a Soviet transporter with 16 wheels across 8 axles each wheel driven by its own electric motor, built to move nuclear ballistic missiles across the country. It was the largest wheeled vehicle ever built, and it shows. The next one, Juliet Marine Systems Ghost. A naval craft that uses supercavitation to ride inside a bubble of air beneath the surface, dramatically reducing drag and allowing speeds that conventional hulls cannot achieve. It looks like a stealth aircraft decided to become a boat instead. Sherp ATV. 6 enormous hollow tires that inflate to float the vehicle on water, climb obstacles higher than themselves, and cross terrain so soft that conventional vehicles sink without trace. It looks like a toy and goes absolutely everywhere. Up next, Wiesel AWC. A tracked armoured vehicle small enough to be dropped from transport aircraft, yet armed enough to support paratroopers against heavy opposition. It looks almost harmless until you notice the weapons, at which point it looks exactly right.